Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Welcome to the show. Julie, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really happy to talk to you today about your book, Paris Blue. You are also a musician, you're a writer, you're splitting your time between the States and France. But I always like to go back to the beginning of our guest stories. So talk a little bit about where you're from and how you connected with France.
Okay, sure. Let me think now. I don't want to go on and on too long. I, as you said, my profession is as a classical musician, and I run a chamber music series in Boston. We now just finished our 27th season, but I have a long history with Paris, beginning when I was 20 years old. That was more than 45 years ago. I did a junior year abroad program in Paris with Wesleyan University. And in fact, that is the beginning of the story that I had been trying to tell for 40 years. I'll get back to that in a second. But my connection to France, it began that way by falling in love with Nice first when I was 19, and I went to a music festival. Lots of flutists there, the famous Jean-Pierre Rampal and many of the other guys who were just as famous as Rampal. And then so I did that first, then I came to Paris for a year. And then this big story happened to me, which I will get back to. And then in more recent years, after having been married 30 years or so, my husband and I bought a house in the south of France. So we spend quite a bit of time here now. And now I have a whole different audience that I'm trying to spread the word to about the story that has consumed my life for so many decades. So sorry, go ahead.
No, and you finally put it to paper. I mean, how long did it take you to write this book, Paris Blue?
Well, that is the really great question. When I answer that, usually I say more than 40 years. I didn't actually work on it for 40 years, but the story has been needing to be in print for that many years. When I was 22, and this heartbreak had happened with this Frenchman, it took me over 40 years to see this book in print. And the reason for that is I knew immediately when I was 22 that I had a story to tell. And what I didn't realize is that when you're writing a memoir is about one thing. It's not a million different parts of your life thrown into one book. I finally, after about 20 years of trying to tell the story and feeling very discouraged and getting quite a few rejections after I sent it out about 20 years ago, I finally read a book on memoir, and I learned that memoir is a universal truth as illustrated by a personal story. And then I understood what to do. And I cut 100 pages and I restructured, and I knew what my truth was, and I changed the title, and the book became real. And then I knew it was going to work. and I found a new title, and I was driving one day in the snow, and I said, I know what the truth of my book is, and I know what the title will be. But that did take me over 4 decades to get there. So the fact that it is now, it's been out almost 3 years now, or 2.5, and that the fact that it has been moving readers and resonating across boundaries is beyond gratifying for me. I was just happy to see it in print. I didn't know if anyone would read it or if anyone would like it. But people have really, really loved it. And I am still getting almost daily emails from readers who tell me that it brought back stories of first love for them, of their own, that they couldn't put it down, that they couldn't stop sobbing at the end. I believe that the reason the book has been doing so well is that everyone has a story of first love in their lives. Well, I can't say everyone because, of course, it's not everyone, but so many people share this experience. And so when they read my story, it brings back their own personal memories. And many of the things that I want readers to take away from my book, of course, I jumped the gun here because I didn't even explain what the premise of the book was. But I will just tell you very briefly that the story begins when I'm 20 years old and just arriving in Paris. And just like every other 20-year-old who arrives in Paris, or even maybe your story as well, Crystal, it was a dream come true. And I was studying the flute, and I was walking hours every day, and I was studying Proust, and I loved it more than anything. But by November, when the sun started staying behind clouds day after day after day, and I realized Paris was for connoisseurs of melancholy, I wondered whether I should stay on my program for the whole year or whether I should go back to my American university and finish my senior year there. But I decided to try to find something to fill the void, and I searched for a chorus to sing in because singing had always been essential to my equilibrium, and I loved it. So I worked very hard to find a chorus. I did find one, the best one in the world, that was the chorus that sang with the Orchestra of Paris and conducted by a legend, Daniel Barenboim. And when I arrived and I was with 200 people who loved to sing, I felt as if I had arrived home. And then 3 weeks into the rehearsals, I was in the middle of singing when I looked up and I saw a man at the end of the second row of basses, baritone basses. And it was as if a movie camera panning across a sea of faces stopped at one and wouldn't move. And I became obsessed with this face week after week. And I was dying to meet him, and I didn't know how. Finally, we did meet. And he started driving me home from rehearsals. He needed to learn English. And we started sitting in all the parks and cafes of Paris, reading Oscar Wilde fairy tales and Wordsworth poetry. And we became enmeshed in a very intensely romantic relationship. But at first, it was really very poetic. It was not physical at all. I should throw in right here that he was married and had a 3-year-old son. Usually when I'm having these book talks and I finally throw that in, people laugh very hard because it was like a very big detail that I left out from the beginning. I did learn that he was separated, and that was when I started accepting his offer to drive me home. But it was never simple. It was very complicated, but it became more and more serious and more romantic and very, very intense. And we shared music, and we shared Paris, and we shared all this poetry. And then the relationship ended suddenly, about 1.5 years later. And the book follows me on a trajectory from very early romance to the heartbreak that happened 1.5 years later, and finally into almost middle age when I spent another couple of decades trying to understand what had happened. And the point of the book really is that when you have something as intense as this type of first love, and it ends suddenly without any closure and without any answers, it can indeed take you a lifetime to get over it. So I continued to meet him when he came to Boston for a drink, for coffee, for dinner. And I was always trying to find out what had happened. And I never got any answers. And I believe that it was the trauma as much as the intensity of first love, but the trauma of never getting any answers that made it impossible for me to let go of this and to figure out why and how one emerges from something like that. One of these, I had the most amazing thing happen, which is that I got John Irving to read my book. And I believe that he did it because we have one thing in common, which is that we both went to the same prep school, Phillips Exeter Academy. And so, of course, I led with that. And he and I also had an essay each in one collection of essays by Exeter alumni. So I led with that, and I told him it was my greatest claim to fame that we were both in the same book, but I had written a memoir, and I was wondering if he would be willing to read it. And he did read it, and he loved it, and he gave me a great quote. But another person who wrote me a quote for the inside jacket was another writer who's written about Simone de Beauvoir and Sartre, said, it captures the ability of Paris, music, and words to drive love to madness. And I love that because it was really the alignment of all those things that made this happen. I often say to people when I'm talking about this, this never would have happened in Middletown, Connecticut, where I went to college. It was the combination of singing in this chorus, sitting in all the cafes and parks and learning Wordsworth poetry together, and being with somebody who didn't speak any English at all. We shared the French language, which, as you know, is another whole world of poetry. And what happened is when he set one foot on Boston soil, he became a person I didn't recognize. And it was a complete Jekyll and Hyde situation where I could not wrap my head around what had happened. I didn't understand it. And it took me decades to try to figure out what had happened. So when I say that I want my readers to take away several things, one of them is that first love really can take a lifetime to get over. That number two, love at first sight really does exist. And number three, that we should not erase or cancel or destroy our memories, because our memories are what make us who we are today. You know, the beautiful thing about this Wordsworth poem that figures prominently in the book, it's a poem called Tintern Abbey, and it's a lyrical meditation on memory. And it is so beautiful because it talks about, while here I stand with a somewhat of a sad perplexity, our memories are life and food for future years. And that when I think about myself at 20, I'm glad that I can still remember how I felt at that young, tender age. And I'm glad I still have all the letters from this man that we wrote to each other back and forth. You know, there might be 200 letters. When I went back to my American college after my junior year abroad, we were separated for that year. And, you know, I'm amazed that our children who are, you know, in their late 20s, early 30s will never understand what that experience is like of writing a letter and waiting 10 days for one to return, because it takes 5 days for that one to get there and another 5 for a response to arrive. And it's absolutely amazing. But the pleasure, the intensely romantic pleasure of waiting for a letter and reading it, that is something that the younger generation just will never, ever understand. The day in, you know, today's era of instant messaging, emails, and texting, there's never a moment when they're separated. So anyway, back to what I hope readers take away from this is that we should love our memories. We should not throw our letters in a bin and burn them. And those memories are who we are, make up who we are today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's so true about the letters. I know I had a pen pal in France before I ever moved there, and it was just so exciting, the excitement of holding a piece of paper. And like you said, it's kind of like when we plan a trip or we plan something, it's like the excitement of waiting, you know, that's where the joy is. It isn't the actual activity, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And the reason I mention the letters also is that I begin each chapter with part of one of his letters. So there's a kind of a displacement, a décalage for the French word of time and place. In other words, the chapter may begin, I can't believe, dear Julie, 1 week ago you left Paris, and yesterday I relived hour by hour your departure. Every Paris loses all meaning for me. All of the memories, the flowers you threw into the Seine on your last day, bus 48, 96, listening to Mozart Requiem, blah, blah, blah. And then the next paragraph, I'm arriving in Paris. So even though the letter is from June of 1977, when I left, the book begins in September of 76, when I arrive in Paris. And then another chapter may say, I can't believe a year ago, you were arriving in Paris looking for a chorus to sing. And then when the actual chapter begins, I'm in Paris looking for the chorus to sing. So each letter that the reader reads gets them a little excited about what's going to happen in the following chapter. It's a little bit of a premonition, a foreshadowing, and it makes the reader, I believe the reason people keep saying, I couldn't put it down, is that they keep wondering, when are they going to meet? Because you can tell immediately that this was an intense love affair and they want to see what happens. So I believe that little structural component helped the excitement of the book.
Oh, I'm sure. Definitely. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about a universal truth. So tell us, what was your truth for writing this book? What was the truth throughout?
I believe, when I started writing the book, when I was about 22, all the way through 35, 40, what happened is at 22, I wrote down the story up till that point, from the moment I arrived in Paris to the moment of the heartbreak. But then, of course, I kept taking it out and adding more about my life up until then. All these bad boyfriends, finally meeting the right man, having these beautiful children, having a career in music, and then continuing to try to get some answers from this guy. Luke in the book, his real name is something else. And I didn't even know what the book was about as I was writing it. I didn't know whether it was about memory or first love or what. In the end, I realized that my truth, and the universal truth, is that first love can take a lifetime to get over. And then my personal story definitely illustrates that. You can see what happened to me. This very, even mentally healthy woman who met the most amazing man at age 30, had the most amazing life and career and children. And yet I was still struggling to put it behind me. The way I described it in my book is that when I finally saw him again, I saw him a dozen times in Boston. I always say it was like Charlie Brown in the football. Lucy says, I promise I won't pull it away. And he falls for it every time. And he tries to kick it. She pulls it away and he falls flat on his back. I'm not sure if your listeners know that allusion to the Peanuts cartoons, but I felt like that character because every time he came to town and said, bonjour, c'est Jacques Le Blevnik. Can we meet? I'm in the Boston Harbor Hotel. And I would think maybe this time he'll finally talk. Maybe he's ready to tell me something. And of course, again, nothing would happen. So when I finally saw him for the last time, I thought to myself as I was going there, as I was driving, and a major snowstorm had been predicted, and I had just finished playing an opera. It was 10:30 at night, and I kept shaking my head and saying, what am I doing? I felt so stupid. I felt like I had regressed to the 20-year-old I had been in Paris. I was probably in my 40s when this happened. And then I realized that I said, there were this is, the narrative in the book. And there were moments that when I was standing in my kitchen with flour caked hands, perfecting my tarte tatin, and my young children would be playing a Haydn trio in the adjacent music room, a fire burning in the fireplace, the scent of fall leaves outside. And my kids would be saying, Mom, come play hide and trio with us. So I was thinking to myself, so what was I doing here? Why was I here still? And then I realized that when you fall in love at 20, I wondered as I drove around lost, does the heart form around the other person, kind of like a tree absorbs a sign when it's a young sapling and grows over the sign. And then when the sign is gone, the tree continues to feel its imprint, where it was and where it once rested. And I thought I could only attribute those feelings to the effects of first love. I could only attribute it to first love, and how that sometimes you never quite get over it. And, there's some people, when I read some of my Amazon reviews, especially the young people who have never experienced something like that, they say, what is wrong with this woman? I can't believe 25 years later, and now, of course, it's 45 years later, I can't believe that many decades later, after she's met this wonderful man, has an amazing life, she's still thinking about this and still writing a book about this. Well, the only people who get it, who really understand it, are those who have had a similar experience. And of course, that's not everybody, but it's a lot of people. Because if you're curious and you read some of the amazing reviews I've gotten on Amazon and Goodreads, so many people say, this brought back my own experience, my own cross-cultural experiences. Some people, it's not cross-cultural, it's just somebody they knew from their youth. And when they got married, they thought about that person. And, even if my guy, I realized, was not the person at all that I thought he was, it makes no difference. When I was poring over the letters after he said, I'm in Boston, can we meet again, for the very last time, I went and dug up all my old letters, 200 of them. And I sat on the floor poring over them one at a time. And there were tears. And I remembered the music of each one so well. I knew each one by memory when I was that age. But it wasn't Luke that I missed, I realized. I missed myself at 20 when there was nothing I was more certain of in the world. And I think that's the feeling I want readers to understand. It's a feeling of ourselves when we were young, before we understood anything, and then we look back at our young selves through the long lens of our adulthood, and it means something entirely different. Like, I didn't know that back then. I didn't know what memories would be 40 years later. I didn't know how memories could imbue, your very essence with so much important. It's such a delicate and sensitive subject that I'm so appreciative of people like you who give me a chance to talk about it. Because, of course, I'm a musician. People know me as a flutist and as the artistic director and founder of this music series that I run, which, by the way, if anyone is curious, is called Mistral Music. And the website is Mistral, like the wind, mistralmusic.org. But music, by the way, I meant to say this earlier, music plays a really big part in this book. And each of the pieces that I talk about has a little footnote. And if one goes to my author website, which is justmyname.com, juliescolnik.com, you can click on each of the pieces and it brings you to a YouTube performance. And I wanted to include that so that as people are reading this book, and I'm talking about this intense response to music, to a piece we were singing together, or to something we were listening to together by candlelight where we had our first kiss, I want people to hear the music so they can understand it better, because words have never been adequate enough to describe the experience of listening to music. You have to hear it to understand what I'm talking about.
And I think that's so beautiful how you combine this romance and writing with music. It's such a great way to express it, because sometimes, like you said, words are not enough, and music can bring so much more emotion to the words.
Exactly. I just wish I had put the list of pieces at the front of the book, because because it's at the back, right now, right after my acknowledgments and, a note from the author, a lot of people, even though there's a little footnote over the piece, they're not curious enough to wonder why it's there. So at the very end, people have told me, I wish I had known, because now I have to read the whole book again and listen to the music at the same time. But some people figure it out. And if you happen to read the Kindle version, all you have to do is click on it and it brings you immediately to the YouTube performance. So I just thought I'd let your listeners know that.
Definitely. That's important information, guys, when you are reading this book.
Thank
And
you.
now that you've written a book, what's something you wish more people knew about writing a book?
Oh, well, I'm so glad you didn't ask me what's the creative process for me, because mine was so different. I'm on all these Facebook groups of writers and memoir writers and this and that. And I feel like mine is such a different experience because I've been wanting to tell this story for so many decades. It's not as if I sat down 5 years ago and said, I think I'll write a book. Let's see, what should I write about? This is a story that has just been dying to be freed from my psyche. And I always say that it's a story that's lingered in the corridors of my mind for over 40 years. And when I came across this quote by Maya Angelou, I said, okay, I'm going to use that if anyone ever asks me. And her quote says, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And I love that so much, because I have to tell listeners that I didn't think I was ever going to get the chance to tell this story. I knew I had a story, but remember, I tried after about 20 years of working on this story. I tried to send it out and I got a million rejections. And then I tried again after having one book doctor look at it, but he wasn't good enough and I didn't understand things well enough still. And so I got discouraged again for another 10 years. Every 5 or 10 years, I'd work on it again. So the fact that I finally have, given birth, so to speak, to this story is just so huge for me. And remind me what your initial question was again. I was coming back to it, but I didn't. Can you tell me what you asked me?
Yeah, what's something you wish more people knew about writing?
Yes, exactly. Well, that if you have a story, do not be discouraged. Stick to your guns. Write it all down, even if it's a big hot mess at the beginning. And get somebody and then read a book called The Memoir Project. That's what made me turn the corner. It's by an amazing book coach whose name is Marion Roach Smith. And it was her book that made me understand what I had to do to make my story work. A lot of it was about getting rid of 100 pages. The story had to be about one thing. And every time I realized I was throwing in too much, like every boyfriend in my 20s, a whole chapter each of my children and how they started the cello, the piano, got rid of it all. Even a lot of really good stories of myself at 20 in Paris, if it was too meandering and didn't get to the point, I took it out. It's hard to do that because you like these little stories, but that's called, in writer's language, it's called killing your darlings. Anyway, if you have a story and you know that you need to tell it, just do it. You will find a way to tell this story. Thank you for reminding me what your initial question was.
Yeah, I love that book. I read that book too.
You did? Oh, excellent. Are you working on a story?
Oh, yeah. I published a memoir years ago.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't know that.
No, of course. It doesn't matter. And like I read that book too, and it helped me so much. I mean, it's such a great book.
Yeah.
And how would you define creativity in your own words?
Oh, wow. So you did get me to talk about this. Let's see. How would I do that? You know what? The first thing I would say is that it is innate. You either have it or you don't. And I believe that I know this because when I run my music series, I am a total control freak about every aspect of it. It is not just that I choose the music and I choose the musicians, but I have to be the one who chooses the font for every poster. I create the posters. I create the program booklets. I create all the email messages that we send out, and I work on the website with my website person. And I believe that some people couldn't care less about that. For instance, my husband, before I learned how to do the program booklets myself, well, for one thing, he's a science guy. He's a physicist. We are two different sides of the brain. But I believe that writing the story and playing music are very much the same thing. I believe that the urgency to tell a story is the same urgency you might feel when you're preparing a concert and you want to share your expression, your vision of a certain piece of music. So that's kind of how I relate the two sides of my life as a musician and as a writer. I have to say, I don't call myself a writer because I feel that one book does not a writer make, but I am flattered to death by this when people say, once I came in to sign books at a bookstore and they said, "Oh, are you the author?" And I thought they were talking to somebody else because I just was so not used to being called an author. So, but I feel that, I feel that people who give dinner parties really well are also creative. It's the same thing. You're bringing somebody into your universe. I sometimes put on my subscription cards when I'm trying to get, all our people to subscribe for the next season. I say something like this in quotes: play music you love with people you love. Invite the public into the concert hall, a hallowed retreat for the mind and imagination, to share a universe you have created for them. You can't go wrong. And that is kind of my definition of creativity in the music world. And with the book, I am just so thrilled that I've shared this inner world of mine with people and that they've liked it. So if anyone's out there is listening and has a book club, there's nothing I enjoy more than joining you all and taking your questions and talking about memory and the role of memory in our lives and your own experiences of first love, etc.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. And where can people connect with you and buy the book and learn more?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. Well, I do have an author site. It's really simple, but it has all the places you can buy it, like Amazon and, of course, Barnes and Noble. There's also like an indie bookstore link. But that website is just juliescolnik.com, and it has lots of links of other podcasts and interviews, some video interviews. And then I also have the music website, if there are any classical music lovers out there, and that's mistralmusic.org. And that will show you how to get to. We also have a YouTube channel, which is just Mistral Chamber Music, and all of our concerts are free to the public. And so I'd love to connect with anyone who's listening to this and shares our love of music and shares the love of Paris and France. The book is called Paris Blue.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Julie, for sharing that with us today. I can't wait to read the book.
Oh,
and I
thank
can't wait
you.
to see what you'll do next.
Oh, you're such a sweetheart. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.